Since we're in our chapter on the federal budget and fiscal policy, it seems reasonable to talk about income taxes because income taxes are far and away the greatest revenue source for the federal government, and it's also the focus often on government revenues in terms of adjustments. So we rarely adjust tremendously other factors of revenue sources that really matter because they're generally minuscule. When it comes to income taxes, this is something that's very important and also something that's probably going to be adjusted many times in your life. So I thought it would be a good time to talk about this in the fiscal policy section. So the federal income tax system is an example of a marginal tax system. And in a marginal tax system, the taxes are based on each dollar being treated uniquely. And I wanted to point this out now because this is the biggest source of mistakes by students on exams and quizzes is misunderstanding what a marginal tax system does. In a marginal tax system, we treat every dollar differently, okay? And both the federal and state tax systems for income in the United States and in Georgia are marginal tax systems, okay? Keep that in mind as we move forward. So let's jump right into it. Let me give you an example of a marginal tax system. We'll start with Georgia. And I like using Georgia's to begin with because Georgia's is really simple. There's not a whole lot of complexity to Georgia's system, so it's easy to make the calculations. And it allows you to instead to focus on the theory rather than the math, because the math is so easy. So here is the brackets. And here's the marginal tax rate in Georgia. As of, I'm looking at my notes. These could be a year or two old, but this is roughly what we're looking at. All right, so these are the tax brackets, and each of these brackets correlates with a different marginal tax system. And in terms of state tax rates, they're relatively low in Georgia compared to, say, the federal income tax system. Okay, so let's show you how this is solved, and let's start with solving for taxes paid. Okay, solving for taxes paid, and let's say that this person's income that we're dealing with is, let's just say $4,000. Okay, so they got a $4,000 income. We're trying to solve for how much taxes they're going to pay. Let me show you the wrong way to do this so that hopefully you'll avoid making this mistake. The wrong way to do this is to take $4,000 and multiply it by 4% and get a solution and be done with it. And I guess in this scenario, that would be $160. That is not the way you do this, okay? The key here is to recognize that, again, this is a marginal tax system. And what that means is every dollar is treated uniquely and not connected to any other dollar, okay? Meaning, if I earn $4,000 or $40,000 or $40 million, my first dollar is going to be treated as a 1% tax. Okay? If I earn $4 million, my $2,251st dollar would fall into this bracket and be taxed at 3%. So every dollar is treated as independent of the other dollars. Okay, so basically what you could imagine doing is, if you're trying to solve for how much taxes you should pay, you just start counting out each dollar. First dollar gets taxed at 1%. Second dollar gets taxed at 1%. All right. Once you're done with the first $750, you move on to the next tax bracket, and you count on from there. So that's the wrong way to do it that we showed there. Let's look at the right way to do this. The way this should look is the first $750 should be taxed at 1%. So 750 times 1% shows how much taxes I pay on my first $750. Okay? Then, the difference between these two values, which is the size of the bracket, would be taxed at 2%. Okay? So now I've dealt with this $1,500, and once I'm done with that, then I start counting up to the next group. So basically, as your income increases, you follow down these tax brackets. All right, so $3,750 minus $2,250, which is the size of this bracket, should be taxed at 3%. Okay, so this $1,500 would be taxed at 3%. And since I'm earning $4,000, notice I don't have enough money to fill up this next bracket. So the remaining $250, right? So I've got $4,000 I'm earning, only $250 would fall into this bracket, and that would be taxed at 4%. So all we got to do is solve for that real quickly, which is something that would be worthwhile for you to practice. Make sure you don't make any mistakes on the exam. I think what you should get here is, well, it came out to exactly $100. Okay? So $100 is what this person would pay in terms of total taxes. So that's one thing I can ask you to do, is solve for the taxes paid. There's two other things I'm going to ask for in terms of mathematic computations, but they're all really based on taxes paid. So another thing you might need to solve for is, all right, taxes paid, that's one. Another one is the post-tax income. That's easy enough. That's just solving for the income you have after you've paid your taxes. So in accounting circles, they might call that your net income, right? Your income after you pay your taxes. That's easy enough. And then the third thing I might ask you to do is solve for the effective tax rate. So in that last example that we just covered, this person's income was $4,000. Their taxes paid was $100. So their post-tax income is simply $3,900. Easy enough, right? Not especially difficult. Effective tax rate, okay, let me just give myself some room here. Tell you what, we've got all that covered, so I'm just going to erase this and let's figure out the effective tax rate. The effective tax rate this indicates what percent of your income what percent of your pre-tax income goes to taxes or goes to the government. Okay? So this is thinking about, in percentage terms, how much of your money goes to the government. And it can be solved using this formula. Simply the taxes paid divided by the pre-tax income times 100 to turn it into a percent. This is pretty easy. If you know the formula, you're just plugging in values. So the taxes paid is $100 for this example we just covered. Pre-tax income, what you started with before paying any taxes, was $4,000. And so you should, after multiplying it times 100, get 2.5%. And what that means is 2.5% of this person's income actually goes to taxes once you've solved for their taxes and everything else. Okay? So pretty easy, not especially difficult. So now let's look at the U.S. tax code. U.S. tax code is extremely complicated, but we're not going to get into the complexities of it. Where it really gets complicated is in terms of things like deductions, right? For example, if I give money to a charity, I can deduct that off of my income. And that's just one example of many ways that taxes can be adjusted. For example, if you have kids, that adjusts your taxable, the taxes that you'll pay. So all that gets really complicated. We're going to ignore that. We're just going to stick simply with the tax brackets and how they work. So this is the U.S. tax bracket. I think this is if you're filing, if you're single. If you're single versus married, it does change a little bit. I don't recall which one which piece of data that I gathered here. But here's the system. So we still have these brackets. And you know, these are data that I gathered, I think last year, maybe early spring, and you know, these things do change over time. So if you're watching this video, maybe in 2020 or something, taking my summer class, these variables could change, the values could change. But the tax system, I don't think is going to change anytime soon. The tax system is going to look at least similar to this. So here are our tax brackets. And notice it's kind of arbitrary where the starts and where the ends are. And if you're wondering why these values are so unrounded, why they're so strange, well, they kind of raise them up with inflation over time, gradually. And so you sometimes end up with sort of some strange values here. And so that's our tax brackets. And here's our marginal tax rates, much higher than the state level. And again, this is ignoring all exemptions and everything. This is like your baseline. This is what you start with if you're solving for taxes. And so the highest marginal tax system, or highest marginal tax rate anyone pays is 39.6%. Okay? So, if you're earning $1 billion a year, your first $93.25 gets taxed at 10%. If you're earning $10,000 a year, your first $93.25 still gets taxed at 10%. That's what makes it a marginal tax system. Why did they do it this way? Why is it set up this way? Why not just tax total income? Well, there's a really important reason, okay? So, for example, suppose I earn $37,945 right now, and I'm offered a raise to $38,000. Right, just a small raise. Maybe just my employer says, you know, I want to hire you and pay you $55 to come in tomorrow for a few hours, something like that. If this was not a marginal tax system, if this just taxed your total income at these rates, then think about what that would do. At $37,945, I would be taxed at 15%. Okay? And if I got $38,000, that would mean I'd get taxed at 25%. So if we taxed all of our income, this would be a scenario where I would say I don't want the raise. and I'm not going to come in tomorrow because I don't want your raise. Right? That's not a good incentive to incentivize people to turn down raises. It's not good that people would have to think about should they be turning down raises. Okay? So that's why we need this system that's a little more complicated than that. When I get my raise to $38,000, that would mean not that all of my money is now taxed at 25%. Instead, it would mean that just the $50 that spills over into this bracket would be taxed at 25%. As a result, the marginal tax rate system guarantees that a pre-tax raise is a post-tax raise. Meaning, ignoring all the complicated stuff that goes on with the deductions and all that nonsense, okay? Just sticking with the baseline tax code. Anytime you're offered a raise, you will get paid more after you pay your taxes. A pre-tax raise always means a post-tax raise, and the marginal tax system guarantees that, okay? So if I go from earning $418,399 a year to $418,401 a year, just that new extra dollar spills into this category, not all of my money, okay? So let me do one more quick question like you might see on the quiz, just to see, just to make sure we understand this very well. So what I might ask is to solve for your effective tax rate if you earn a pre-tax income of, let's say, $92,000. So solve for your effective tax rate if you earn a pre-tax income of $92,000. The first thing you're going to need to do is solve for your post-tax income. Or rather, I'm sorry, taxes paid. You need to figure out how much taxes you're paying. Okay? If I was you, I'd pause the video now and see if you can do this, and then put it back on play and see if you got to the same answer as me. The way this should work is $93.25 should be taxed at 10%, like so. You move on to the next bracket. So whatever's in this bracket is going to be taxed at 15%. Okay. I'm earning $92,000, so this next bracket, I'm going to completely fill that one up as well. So $37,950 taxed at 25%. Plus, how much money should go here? How much should go into this category? Well, $92,000 is what I earn, and the bottom of this bracket is $91,900. So I'm just going to write 100 here to represent the amount that falls into this bracket, and that's the amount that would be taxed at 28%. So this is a little tedious, but I'm going to plug this into my calculator and see what I get. What I got here was 18,741.75, and I'm just going to go back and make sure, be very careful, make sure I didn't make any mistakes. It's super easy to make a mistake on one of these because you're just typing in so much. And that's my taxes paid. Okay, I believe that's correct. But that's not what the question asked for. The question asked for the effective tax rate. So the next thing I need to do is take that value and divide it by my initial income, which is $92,000, and see what I get. Okay. If you're doing this correctly, you should get about 20.37% as my solution. And what I like to tell students is to make sure that answer makes sense, because I'll see students solve for this and they'll get 8%. And I'm like, well, look up here. I mean, it's got to be more than 8%, right? Because all their money's going to be taxed at 10% or more. Sometimes I'll get students who solve for this and they'll get 40%. Well, it can't be 40% because the very most anyone's getting taxed is 39.6. So it should make sense. It should be somewhere in the range of what you might expect. And that does make sense, doesn't it? Right? Some of the money's being taxed at 10, 15, 25, and a little bit at 28. There's a lot of money being taxed at 25 here. So you would expect to find an answer, around 20. And that's what we get. So this means 20%, 20.4% of this person's pre-tax income is going to go towards paying taxes. And if you are in the U.S., this is a good place to start with solving for your tax estimates of what you can expect to pay. But it doesn't include everything. It doesn't include everything that you're actually going to be paying in total taxes. This is just simple income taxes. Okay, so we're getting near the end of this discussion on taxes. Three terms that I want to define. More simple concepts, but the type of concepts where the student who doesn't study will miss them and be completely clueless of why they missed it. There are three types of tax systems we can have. We can have progressive, regressive, or proportional. Okay? And I hear people in the news talk about, regressive taxes and progressive taxes a good bit. Sometimes they don't understand it either. So this is a good thing to cover so that you can follow along and understand these concepts. Progressive tax, okay? Let me show you what students sometimes think that's wrong. So this is wrong, okay? I'm going to write it in red so that you don't write it this way. Progressive, a lot of students think that this means that as your income increases, you pay more taxes. All right, so as your income increases, you pay more tax dollars, meaning as you earn more, you're going to pay more money to the government. That is not a progressive tax system, okay? That would be a horrible definition of a progressive tax system. So I'm going to erase it, and let me give you the correct solution now. A progressive tax system means that as you earn more income, you pay a higher tax rate. As your income increases, you pay a higher tax rate. All right? And let me be very clear here by what I mean by tax rate. You pay a higher effective tax rate. That's probably a better way of putting it. Okay? So as your income goes up, your effective tax rate goes up too. That would be a progressive tax system. Compare that to a regressive tax system. That means that as your income increases, you pay a lower effective tax rate. So as your income goes up, your effective tax rate goes down. And then the third one here, proportional, that would mean that everyone pays the same effective tax rate. So tax rates are proportional to your income. Okay, so based on that information there, let's do a little bit of analysis. And I think the best way to understand why this is important and to understand how to make a mistake is just to see an example. So let's say we've got three people here. And this is their income. And this is their taxes paid. Okay? Keep the numbers nice and simple here so that we don't have any trouble understanding what we're doing. So person one has 1,000 income, person two, 2,000, person three, 3,000, and person 4 has 100,000. And let's say the taxes they pay is 300, 1,000. Let's do 300, 500, 2,000, and 10,000. Okay? So here's their income, here's the taxes they're paying. Based on that information, is this a progressive, regressive, or proportional tax system? And the big temptation here is to look at this and say, the more they make, the more they pay, so this is progressive. Okay? But remember, that's not the definition of progressive. The definition of progressive is as your income goes up, your effective tax rate goes up. Okay? And that's relative to your income, right? It's not saying how much dollars you pay, it's relative to your income. So we would need to solve for their effective tax rate on each of these. Okay, and I use some nice easy numbers, so this should be easy enough. This person's paying 30% of their income is going to taxes. This person is at 25%, 20%, and 10%. Okay? So this isn't a progressive tax system at all. In fact, it's regressive, and it's highly regressive. The person earning the least is paying 30%. The person earning the most is paying 10%. Okay? A couple of takeaways from this. One, you got to be careful about using progressive and regressive. It's not always as obvious as it initially seems. And secondly, this should show you that a regressive tax system is not as ridiculous as it sounds. A lot of people, when they hear regressive, they're like, well, why would you tax the poor more than the wealthy? But that's not really what a regressive tax system is doing. It's taxing at a different rate, okay? And certainly, someone could make the argument that this is a reasonable tax code. I don't know, maybe it is, but it's certainly not ridiculous, right? Because the more you earn, the more you're paying. It's just the effective tax rate goes down. Let me give you one more example. Sales tax. This is an interesting one to think about, okay? A sales tax system is actually regressive, all right? So in a lot of towns in Georgia, this rate is at 7%. And this is not a federal issue, right? This is a state and local issue, sales tax. What this means is everyone pays a 7% tax on the things they purchase. But it's going to end up being regressive. Because, for example, imagine two people. Let's say person 1 earns $30,000 and spends all $30,000. Okay? In this case, this person's going to be paying 7% of their income is going to go to the sales tax because every dollar they earn is spent. So 7% of this money is going to go to the tax system. Now let's imagine person 2. And let's say this person earns $100,000 and spends $50,000. Okay? Thinking about this now, this person here is going to be paying 7% in terms of their sales tax. This person here is going to be paying 7% as well, but only 7% on the money that they spend. Okay? This person's effective tax rate would actually come out to 3.5%. Because only 3.5% of their income would go to the taxes. You should be able to show that mathematically. This person, though, since all their money is going towards, is being spent on items, their effective tax rate would be at 7%. So things like a sales tax, even though everyone's paying the same rate on the things they purchase, usually are regressive because low-income people spend all of their money. Wealthy people spend only a proportion of their money. Okay, only a percentage of their money is actually spent. So this ends up being a regressive tax system. Okay, so you really have to understand these. And on the quiz and on the exams, the questions will be mathematically straightforward if you understand the concept. It's the concepts that are the challenging part.